Right, so I'm Susan Cope, I'm the Managing Director of Professional Properties and have been for more years than I want to admit, so 20 years. And in that time, I've seen massive, massive change in the industry. So, as Darren alluded to earlier, why isn't this moving? Right, there are now over 150 pieces of legislation governing the private rental sector. So we need to make sure you're compliant, but you also need to be aware of what the regulations are. This is a little graph that we've prepared earlier for you, so you can see what's happened in the, what legislation or major legislation has come in over the last 27, 28 years. So from 1991 up to 2006, not an awful lot happened. Since then, all of this has gone on. And there's been massive, massive regulation changes, things that we need to know, things that we need to make sure we're doing. So I'm going to touch on a couple of those tonight, because to try and talk to you, we're here till midnight, so if we try and touch on too many. So the Deregulation Act of 2015 and the HMO licensing laws that change on the 1st of October this year. So, what does it mean to you? So the Deregulation Act, this was brought in predominantly to, let me go back, this was brought in predominantly to improve the standards in the private rental sector. And to make it easier for landlords and tenants to understand what their obligations were and what the requirements are sort of moving forwards in the industry. So the first thing that they changed was all this documentation needed to be served on your tenants on the day of moving or prior to them moving in. How to rent. The How to Rent guide is a government document. It's on their website. It changes regularly. It changed twice in June. So if you've got this document saved anywhere, you need to be checking the website rather than reproducing what you've got on your systems. The gas safety, CP12 as it was known, came into force in 1998. Nothing really has changed with that. So we all know really what we're doing with that. It's an annual certificate. Any gas appliance has to be checked annually. EPC legislation, that came into force in 2008 in terms of the rental sector. So we're coming up for renewal on them because they lasted for 10 years. At the top, you've got A to G ratings, and since April of this year, the F and G ratings are no longer acceptable in a rental property. But there's no need to panic, so at the moment. So if you have a property that falls into an F or G category, and it's going to cost you more than a penny to actually improve it to get it to E or above, then you can apply for an exemption. That will give you 2 years grace to make any changes that are necessary to bring your property up to where it needs to be. And finally, the other document that needs to be served is the prescribed information for whichever deposit scheme that you're using. So all of those documents have got to be served prior to your tenant moving in, and you need proof that you've served them. So whether that's included as part of your tenancy agreement and your tenants have signed to say they've had the document, whether you serve it separately and get them to sign a separate sheet, you need proof. And I'll tell you why shortly. The other thing that's happened is Home Office right to rent checks. So we're now immigration officers as well, and if you self-manage, so are you. So you've got to do ID checks on every tenant, it doesn't matter which country they're from. You've got to prove that you know where they're from. You've got to do immigration status checks, so if they are outside of the EU, then you need to see the visa, and checking the visa and recording how long that's valid for. If they've not got a visa, they should have applied for a visa, then you can rent your property to them, so that's not the end of the world either. These checks should be done every 12 months, and again, you can't discriminate, so it's got to be on every tenant, not just everyone that you think perhaps shouldn't be here. Children coming of age, so we've all rented properties to tenants with children. When they come to be the age of 18, you need to be checking again what their status is and whether they've got the right to remain. If we don't, the fines are massive if you've not done your job, unfortunately. So, and again, you need proof that you've been doing this. So, the other thing that they did as part of the Deregulation Act was give us a form that's the same for everybody. Prior to this, you'd got various different Section 21 forms that were out there in the marketplace. We've now got a set document that you have to complete. And you can't serve the notice now until at least 4 months have elapsed of the tenancy agreement. If you serve it before, it'll be invalid. So, and you can only serve it, or you should only serve it, as long as you've served all those other documents that we talked about, your how to rent, your gas safety, your EPC, and you've done your right to rent checks. So, if you don't, and you take your tenant to court, then it'll be thrown out before you've even started, and you will have to serve the papers. So, it's inadvisable to serve a Section 21 if the relevant documents haven't been served. Now, if it hasn't, again, that's not the end of the world. Serve them, give them a couple of weeks, and then serve your notice again. That is sufficient. If a property requires a licence, which it will do from the 1st of October, and you've not got it licensed, you won't be able to, your Section 21 will be unsuccessful. Until you've got your licence in place, then you'll need to serve your Section 21 again. Right, the last one is the one that's sort of proven to be the real minefield. So the tenant has raised maintenance issues. We get lots of maintenance issues raised, don't we, by tenants. So how many of you in the room have heard of retaliatory or revenge eviction, which is what this is another part of the Deregulation Act. So this part of the Act was introduced to prevent landlords all over the country, it's not obviously just our area, evicting tenants rather than carrying out repairs that have been reported. And the aim here was to improve housing standards across the rental sector. In reality, what it's actually done is given the tenant another get-out to say why they're not moving out of a property. So, if a tenant raises an issue with you, you've got 14 days to acknowledge the reported issue, or the tenant then goes to the council and invites them into your property to raise any necessary works orders against you. Any notice served under these circumstances, again, is unlikely to be invalid. So, let's tell you a little story about Mr. Stevenson. He's a tenant fined, let-only landlord who came to see us. He'd got a property that he was renting out. The tenant had been there for a few years. His daughter's coming back from Australia and he wanted her to move in there. So, he said to me, I've done this, I've done that, I've served the notice, and I phoned the tenants last week to see when they're going. They're supposed to be moving out in 2 weeks, and they've told me, the council have told them to say where they are, what can I do? So I said, right, have you served all the how to rent, EPC, gas safety, deposit? Have you registered your deposit? Yeah, done it. Have you got proof you've done it? Yeah, I think so. Have you done your served your Section 21 correctly and in accordance with what it says you're going to, how it says you're going to do it in your tenancy agreement? Yeah, done that. Yeah, done it. Has your tenant reported any issues, maintenance issues to you that you've not dealt with? No, everything's fine. So I said, well, it sounds to me, you're going to have to take them to court, you've got to go for a repossession order. The lead time at the moment in the courts is 6 weeks. That gives you a 10-minute hearing in front of a judge who could have just been dealing with a multitude of cases, so whether it's family law, sort of small claims from one party to another, they can be dealing with anything. And the problem we're finding is that these judges are dealing with that many different things, and the legislation in the housing is changing that quickly that the judges can't even keep up with it. So if that's tenant, you've got to be able to demonstrate in that hearing that you've done what you're supposed to do. So you've served the notice, you've served all the paperwork, you've got proof you've done all of that, and then just hope that the judge believes you when they said you haven't had any maintenance issues reported. In this instance, you proved that you'd served all the paperwork correctly, all of that was fine, but the tenants then told them that there'd been a leak in the roof that had been reported months ago. The landlord knew nothing of it. So there was reasonable doubt there with that judge that there was something amiss. And bearing in mind, it's the tenant's home. So that led to an adjournment. So once you've got that adjournment, for basically undergrounds that more time was needed because they've got 10 minutes. And you've got 10 minutes for everybody to speak, not just you. So that then led to an adjournment, which then meant it went back into the system. You've got another 6-week lead-in time to then have an hour to tell the judge why he should give you your property back. So in this case, I think there was, Mr. Stevenson proved that that leak was fictitious and hadn't happened, and certainly the council hadn't even been involved. So just the fact that those people said that they had a leak, we knew they'd not been to the council, but the fact that they'd said they'd had a leak, that landlord didn't know that there was supposed to be a Category 1 works order placed on the property in order for him to allow that tenant to stay. So he eventually got his property back 5 months later, because he allowed them the maximum time to stay at the property that is allowed to, which is 42 days. Because if there was children involved, it was around Christmas time. So 5 months, no rent, because the tenant never paid another day's rent from the minute they were served the notice. All the court fees, and they're astronomical. I think, is it £355 you're telling me earlier, Kelly? Just to put somebody in court to get your property back. But then you've got all the fees, you know, by the time you get to that second hearing, you need representation. So it goes on and it goes on and it goes on. So making sure you've got proof, proof and proof. Now I'm going to touch on something very quickly here, because deposit registration, this has been legislation now for 11 years. I'm just going to grab those drink water, that's okay. It's been legislation for 11 years. So I'm sure most of you in this room have got tenants' deposits. If you've not got any of them registered, get them registered. You can't serve your notice. If the tenant realises that deposit isn't registered, you will be sued for between 1 and 3 times the amount of the deposit plus the deposit amount. And the longer the time goes on, the less of an excuse you've got not for having done it in the first place, or, you know, not saying you didn't know. The next one, they're the three schemes that you can register your deposits with. The next one is GDPR. This came into force in May this year. Probably think you don't need to know about it. If you're a self-managing landlord, you do need to know about it, because you're a data controller. So you are responsible for other people's data and the security of that. So if you don't know about it, I'm not going to, I could definitely keep you for hours on this one. If you don't know about it, you need to look it up. So that kind of concludes my very brief and quick overview, because I know we've run over on in terms of the Deregulation Act and all the little bits. So I'm going to move on to I think there's quite a few people here that are more interested in this one tonight anyway. So HMO regulations that are coming into force on the 1st of October. So this is quite interesting. Well, I think it is. So what are the changes, or what's happening? So from the 1st of October, a mandatory licence is required for every property that's got 5 or more people in that are unrelated. And it's not just people, it's occupants. So if there's children in the property, they form part of the count. So primarily again, this has been introduced to ensure that the safety of all the occupants in a multiple occupants property, and they've got smoke alarms, you've got adequate fire systems and everything else. And it's estimated, I think the figures are from last week, we saw the council this week who's got the figures countrywide. So there's 500,000 HMO properties in the UK at the moment. And where's James? He's probably outside. I think there's 231 licensed HMOs in Derby at the minute. So I think that figure, it'll be interesting to see what happens to that figure is over the course of the next few weeks. So what's changing? The biggest one is obviously the first part of it. So the 3-storey rule no longer applies. So if you've got a property with 5 or more occupants in, whether it's a flat, whether it's a bungalow, whether it's a house, it doesn't matter what it is, it's a HMO and you need a licence. There's minimum room sizes that have been introduced. You've got to prove you've got adequate waste disposal, which is the most bizarre thing to me. And if you don't comply, the fines are up to £30,000. Your phase banning orders, which means you can't rent your property to anybody, you've got no income coming in if you've got a mortgage, that's going to hit you hard. If the tenant realises your property shouldn't be licensed, should be licensed and it isn't, then they can apply for a rent repayment order, and that will give them every penny of the rent they've paid to you back in their pocket, and you won't be able to rent that property until it's licensed. So it's not all doom and doom. So, licence application must be submitted to the council by the 1st of October, and they are going to be strict with this. Certainly Derby City, we spoke to them Monday, they came in to see us. They want those applications in. It costs £757 for a licence in Derby, and there's no plans to change that at the moment. In East Staffordshire, I don't know if we've got any HMO licence holders in East Staffordshire. Their charge is £555 if you fill the form out correctly the first time, and if you don't, then it goes up to £650. And they're looking at increasing that. That's actually out now with the count in the other people's hands to look to increase that fee. So minimum room size changes. within a specified time frame. So if you're anybody that's interested, you've got a HMO booklet there. It's got the Derby City Council guidelines in there that he walked to us the other day. It's telling you about bathrooms and room sizes. And I've done the one, so Derby City Council at the moment isn't in line with what the national, with what the legislation actually says it's got to be, and they're looking at it because they're not going to be able to sort of pursue anybody if the room sizes meet the minimum requirement. So, if you've got a property now that you let out and the room sizes aren't as they should be, they're not suddenly expecting you to expand the property to give more room. If that tenant has other common areas that they can use, then they're likely to leave things as they are, let you leave things as they are. They'll look at your agreements, look how long your tenants are due to be there for, and then they'll give you a time frame. They've got a lead time of up to 18 months that they can give you to make any changes necessary. If the room sizes after that time aren't adequate, you won't be able to rent it out as a bedroom. Right. Waste disposal. So Derby City Council are employing community marshals to go and check that your bins are where they should be and there's no bin liners on roads and no refuse on roads. So they give you a warning, they'll ask the tenants to move it, or they'll ask us, or you if you're managing your properties yourself, to ask your tenants to move it. If it's persistent offences, they will order you to get a trade waste licence, and you'll be paying for that because your tenancy agreement's already in place. So that's just something to bear in mind. It's really bizarre. I think it's probably more geared for sort of the London market where it's probably more of a problem. So all of those licences, the licence will stipulate how many people you're allowed to have in your property. You've got the stipulations for what the room sizes need to be, and you know about the waste disposal. So in terms of the other stuff, like what sort of fire alarm systems you need, what sort of smoke alarm systems, what sort of... Derby City Council website is really very good and very thorough in explaining all of that too. So don't get too bogged down because it's probably not as bad as you think it's going to be. And repeat offenders. So if you persist in breaking the law, you will face a banning order. And I've actually seen in the news today, unfortunately, somebody has had a banning order placed on them, I think today, in a £36,500 fine. So, I don't know the ins and outs of that. Right, so another piece of interesting information. Where do the fines go? So prior to April 2015, any fines that were issued by local councils went into central government and they distributed the budget as part of the budget, the money's out, they kept the rest of it. From April 2015, any fines that are issued go to the local council. So it's in their interest now to make sure that not only are you compliant, but it's also, you know, they're getting all your licence fees, that's going to them, and they're going to get all the fines that they collect. So maybe a little bit more of an incentive for them to get on top of it all. So finally, a property with 3 or more unrelated occupants, and I think we had this conversation the other day, maybe, is a HMO, but you don't need a licence for it, and I will say at the moment. So whilst no licence is currently required, management regulations of 2006 apply. And again, that's information if you want to ask, let me know, drop me a line if you want to know what it is, I'll send you the leaflet, or again it's available on the website. So if you've got any doubt in your mind about anything, ask. The expertise is there to help you, so whether it's you come into an agent or whether you go into the council, the information's there and they're really helpful. They want to get everybody compliant because the whole point of this is people's safety. You know, in 2007, there were very few properties let to single people, and now there's lots and lots of single people out there across all sectors. So whether they're moving here for work, whether they're family separations, whatever, there's a lot of young people quite suddenly living on their own. And I'm going to leave this one. So ignorance is not an excuse for non-compliance. As far as the law is concerned, you are all professional landlords, and that's exactly how a judge will treat you if you're ever in front of them. And that's me with that.